morning. Today's date is 4/14/23, 2023. We have three celebrities here in front of you. The one in the center is Irv Levine. Irv Levine. The one to the right is Larry Head. The one to the left is Fred Williams. We're going to interview these people first about the hump. Now, up here, I'm going to show you the hump. This is what we're going to talk about. This is a very important part of World War II. This is a map of China and a map of the hump. And Mr. Irv here worked over there. He's going to talk to you about it. He's a radio man up there. And so he helped where you see the blue triangle up. That is the hump where we had to move supplies. It was the biggest airlift up to its time. The only bigger airlift in history is the German airlift, Berlin airlift about 1948-49. This airlift occurred from around 1940 to 45. You see the blue lines. The blue lines is what Irv was in charge of over there. He first was in India over by Chabawa, and then he moved over to Kunming, the third Chinese capital during World War II. So here we go with Irv. We're going to ask Irv some specific questions. And in the background here, this is Irv's picture in the military. You see him, it's a little glare on it, and below his picture is his Loran. And he's going to talk a little bit about Loran. That's the radio that he used to help the pilots fly the hump. And the other gentleman over here is Mr. Craig, Larry Head, and his dad was over there, and we're going to let him talk about his dad over there. Then the final is going to be Mr. Williams talking. Okay, so Irv, let's talk about, let's say, what year did you get to India about? 43?
43, yes.
And then you went to India, went there by ship, and then you got up near Chabawa. Tell us what it was like there. Did they have a lot of cars, a lot of roads and telephones and good plumbing?
Well, we went to India. There wasn't any plumbing, nothing like that. It took us a month to go on a ship from Florida to India. And we traveled from the west coast of India across India itself by train, Tier 3 train. And
how long did it take you to get there by train to your base?
Couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks. And so the train was an Indian train, not a United States train. A little bit different.
It was an Indian train, but also they had different meters of rail, so the Japanese couldn't use the rails. And we ended up in Chabawa, and we were actually about, I'd say 10 miles out of Chabawa in the jungles. And we stayed out of a house built by, I imagine, the United States. There was a tea plantation, and about 5 miles west of that was our station, where we handled RAN equipment.
RAN equipment meaning radio waves was the first invention of radio waves. First we used it in the ships, then we used it in the air for transmitting radio waves so the planes knew where they were.
RAN equipment is long-range navigation.
Long-range navigation, okay.
And we sent a signal all down for the pilots to fly to China, and it was Navy equipment.
Okay, let me show him a picture of what he just talked about. This is a Loran radio right there, and it was to help navigate up there in the mountains, because these Himalayas were 14 to 18,000. That says Loran, long range navigation. And here's what he navigated over. There is the blue arrow, the blue lines is what Irv did. The left of the blue line is Chappawa, and that was in India, and they would shoot these waves. They went up to 250. Some things said it goes as far as 500 miles because these planes were up in the air and they wanted to know where they were. So this Irv was responsible for doing that. And there's a picture of him bringing some of the oil. That's an elephant over in India and bringing the oil, transporting the oils. And up atop here, this is a C-46. And next to Irv is that's a C-46 plane up on top. That would hold 46,000 pounds, lots of oil to transport over to China for the fight against Japan. And if you looked, this uniform is owned right behind Irv, is owned by Lloyd Brinker. And Lloyd Brinker had 68 missions over the hump there during World War II and came back to the United States. That was called Aluminum Alley because we lost close to 1,000 planes and many men in Aluminum Alley, because if you went down that alley, you were in trouble. And Irv flew over it 2 or 3 times. Now, Irv, tell us about, did you see lions or tigers when you were in India?
We had tigers, man-eating tigers would come out into the tea plantation and attack the natives. And they called us one evening. We all were sitting at the dinner table, and the natives said, "We got tiger, we got tiger." They want us to go and kill the tiger, which was in a pit. And I went along with it, but I couldn't shoot the tiger. and so we salvaged the tiger and took it back to the camp, skinned it, and then we had a drawing for the skin. And unfortunately, I didn't win it. But I don't know, the gentleman that I was with, he got it, and he sent it home.
And the tiger, did you eat the meat of the tiger, or the natives eat the meat?
Natives did.
Did they? Yeah. So there, and a lot of tea around there. That's where India made a lot of its money, sending some of the tea to England and other places in the world. But you were over in Bengali, so you were in East India, north of where what East Pakistan is now.
Yeah.
Or they call it something else now. Bangladesh, East Bangladesh. Okay, now tell us how many hours you work for transmitting the radio waves a day. About 8-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts?
8 to 10 hour shifts. We have really 20, but it was around the clock, 24 hours a day.
What did you do? Just sit there and make sure the radios are transmitting? Did you hear your transmission back to you?
No transmission ever came back to us.
It was just shooting a wave up there.
We had that wave, and we had to keep the wave going. I mean, that was, as you mentioned earlier, the hump was very treacherous.
So the planes knew where the wave was, and it gave them an idea how to fly.
That's right.
Okay. Now, when you moved from India to China, you went to Kunming, and that's their third capital, I believe, in World War II. They were running away from their East Coast because the Japanese were taking over.
Yeah.
So tell us what Kunming was like, and when you landed it, when you took off from Chappawa, tell us what that takeoff was like, what kind of plane you were in, and then how the landing was.
Well, it was a
C-47?
C-47, and we flew the hump, and it was very rough due to the fact that we were going over mountains and coming down the valley and then going up. And it was, you could see the problems that the pilots were having. Yeah. And it was very treacherous.
Let me just show the map again here. I'm showing the map. Now, what he's talking about is over that blue area. This is called flying the Hump. So if you look up where that blue area is on the map, down south is the Indian Ocean. Warm water would penetrate the Himalayas. Up the Himalayas is very cold weather. So some winds were coming very strongly, hitting each other, and some drafts were as much as 140 miles an hour. There were some reports where pilots said their plane turned upside down. Very, very treacherous because warm wind was hitting the cold wind. This was a treacherous time, and what Larry has given me a handout. When you think of how many planes would take off, the fighter planes would not take off if it was cloudy, but the transport planes took off in about anything. It was all IFR, all cloud flying, and they took off every 3 to 10 minutes. And it was amazing what was transported at that time to help the Chinese. Now, 80% of the Japanese troops were based in China. So the United States knew it was important to try to give them a threat there and give Chinese some supplies, because Japanese forces were in mass in China, and China had no defense at all. And so China lost close to 25 million in World War II, mostly because of Manchuria and China, and they had no arms compared to the Japanese. It was a slaughter. And after Doolittle Run, some of the Chinese helped the Doolittle people, and when they helped them, as much as 250,000 people were killed because the Chinese helped the Doolittle people be salvaged. And this is a little bit of Doolittle Run happened in April of 42, but a lot of this happened during and after that. Now, tell us about the Chinese area. When you landed in Kunming, how was the landing and what was the life like in China, Irv?
Well, I want to go back and mention something over the hump. Plane was flying from maybe 18, 20,000 feet. They hit pocket and dropped down to 16,000 feet. And that's where we lost the plane. But during that, landing in China was, we had a smooth landing. There was, of course, Chinese natives were around, and we unloaded the plane, and we went to our base where we stayed. And I was over there until the end of the war.
Okay, take your hat off here, Irv, so we can see you. Take your hat off.
Take your hat off.
All right, now, Irv, this is his picture right now, and then right over here, there's a picture when he's 20 years old over there. There's a picture of 20. He had a little bit more weight on him there. He's skinny down some, but that's Irv at age 20, and there's Irv right now, and he has his hat on there. That's 20, that was Irv. And so he was in the Army, Air Corps Army, and he was a radio man, but did all kinds of things. Came from Ohio, right? You're born and raised in Ohio. All right, now, anything else that, the Chinese good to you over there, and you had good food in China, and were you used to that, eating that food?
Well, we ate food that was transported in, and we wouldn't eat any Chinese food though.
Okay. All right, let me have Larry add a bunch of things. Larry's an expert on this because his dad's over there. Tell us what your dad did over there, Larry. Tell us your dad's birth date, death date, and what he did over there.
Well, my dad was born April 7th, 1915, and he died in 2003. He was a crew chief. He had trained as a mechanic, and he went over there and became a crew chief for a while. Eventually, he became a line chief, which he ran a maintenance line. When Tunner started production line maintenance, he still flew every month. While he was a crew chief, that's a picture of his plane landing in China up there while he was a crew chief.
Okay, let me show him to. This is a C-46 landing. So crew chief, C-46, right. There were several planes that landed over there. The main one, it started with a B-24, had some fighters trying to protect them. And then you had the C-47 early. The C-46 came later. The C-46 would carry about twice the weight of the other planes. Right. So it was a very valuable plane and one of our major transport planes in World War II. And your dad was in charge of making sure that plane was working right.
That's right. And he flew with the plane. Now, the C-46 was the only plane that could fly the high route. When when Japanese had fighters based in Myitkyina, Burma, they threatened the lower routes. The C-47s couldn't fly the high route, nor could the C-54s. The C-46s could. They could fly the high route, so that's why they were used so much.
How about the B-24? Could it fly to the high route?
It could, but, and they turned a lot of those into tankers.
Yeah.
Called C-109s or C-10 boom, because they had a lot of explosions on those.
So before we go further, let me tell you what happened. Right here, this is the Burmese Trail. What Larry was referring to is there was one walkway from China to India. It was a Burmese Trail. It was
Burma Road.
Burma Road, made 1937. And if you look here, it was the only way to get through. And so the Japanese had taken over Burma, controlled Burma, and so we had no way to get any goods to China. And elaborate on the Lido Road and
The Burma Road was done, right, like you say, in the late 30s, finished in the late 30s, well, finished in the 40s, but started in the 30s with British and Chinese labor, and then Americans got involved when we became the area. It was 117 miles through the mountains to get to China. When the Japanese gained control of Myitkyina, when they moved up into Burma, they cut the Burma Road, so you could get no motor transportation into China. And that's when we started hauling everything over the hump. Now later they built the Lido Road.
what year was that happened?
The Lido Road was...
No, the first one.
The Burma Road was cut in probably about 41,
Okay.
42. That's when we actually started flying the hump. The Chinese National Aircraft Corporation pilots pioneered the hump early on, and they flew C-47s. But when the Burma Road was cut and they had to take the high route, they had to find a right through the high hump. My dad, like I said, he was a crew chief, flight engineer, if you want to call it that. And then later was mechanic. He lived in bamboo huts erected by the natives, made out of, they called them bashas.
Did he live in China or in India?
In India. He was in Mohanbari, India, which was a little west of Chhabwa. And it was right on the Brahmaputra River. Like I said, they lived in bamboo huts. He lived in that hut for 2 years.
And tell us about the Lido Road and how they created that, and its reference to the Burma
The
Road.
Lido Road is also called Stilwell Road because General Joseph Stilwell was partially in charge of that area along with the British and Indian. And also they laid a pipeline along that road to take fuel into China. It was probably built late in 44. I imagine the Lido Road was probably pushed through. The hump still carried more supplies than the Lido Road ever did.
Lido Road was north of Burma. It went straight from India to China.
It went straight down and connected to part of the Burma Road and then went into China.
And how wide was that road?
That I don't know. It wasn't that wide. I think the Lido Road was probably a little better than what some of the Burma Road was, but they had trouble, it was on mountain sides and stuff like that. It was very rugged terrain that they had to push that road through on. So the Burma Road was kind of rugged too.
How about other things that we haven't covered, Larry, of the importance of this, the hump, that very few people know about?
Well, my dad told us when he was 85 years old that he bailed out one time.
Wow.
And from what he told us, we think he bailed out into Burma. We don't know for sure. He said he got hung in a tree, got himself out of a tree, hiked down on a mountainside to a stream, went along that stream, which was some of their survival training they were told to do. He ran into some natives. They were friendly. They took him to a village, fed him, took care of him for a while. They must have sent runners to another place because they took out hiking again and encountered another group of natives coming toward them. And he joined that group and they took him to another village and fed him, took care of him. And then they hiked until they came to a road and they waited for a U.S. Army truck to come along the road. And they took him to a base and he flew back. He said, worst week of his life, is what he told us.
What kind of plane did he bail out of? Did the plane crash or did he just...
Probably C-46. He assumed it did because the only reason you get out of a plane is because you have a mechanical problem and they were over the mountains. And he told us at that time there were only 3 guys on the plane, the pilot, co-pilot, and himself. And he was probably the first one out. He didn't see any of the other crew on the ground. And if the plane's flying 180 mile an hour, you bail out and the next guy doesn't go out till 2 or 3 minutes later, he could have been well on the other side of a ridge, and you never see him again. So.
And then, that was just, and survival over in Burma and survival in the Himalayas is very difficult. So
Yeah,
his survival training helped him, but most people didn't survive.
Right.
They came out.
Usually had, there are guys, some guys it took them a month to get out. Eric Severide had to bail out over the hump. That's a story, and they actually had search and rescue started on the hump. Very first actual search and rescue started on the hump. They went in and got him out. They parachuted in to his team and led them out, sent them supplies and stuff. So he was famous CBS News, that guy.
Any other famous people at the hump? Irv's famous. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Your dad?
My dad. There were, I can't remember all. I had some of the names that were associated, like Gene Autry was associated with it for a while. Trying to remember some other names. Politician. Ran for president, Republican, Goldwater.
Goldwater.
Yeah, I think he was associated with it.
Yeah, Goldwater helped set up the Air Force Academy back in '47.
Right.
And there's a person from Evansville that's famous. I'm gonna put a picture, show him. His name is Ellis Carson up here. Ellis Carson was a flyboy. He helped start Sunbeam Plastics here. Sunbeam, that's him right there. And there's Carson Center, and also Camp Carson that started by his dad named William Carson. But he had a big collection of planes. You look at, he's got a plane collection here of Enola Gray there, and he had these exhibited at our airport for many years. He was a real plane guy, helped with a lot of plane events here in Evansville in the early 70s. But he flew a fighter plane. I don't think he flew a transport plane, but famous from Evansville. And I told you about Brinker and then Mr. Head and Irv here. So we got a lot of famous people here in Evansville from that saving us. Now the only other thing is there's a picture of that C-46 flying over the Himalayas. I don't know if that's Larry's dad's or Irv got in that one, but you look at the Himalayas, how dangerous they were.
Yep.
So Larry got something else here. Larry's got another comment.
There was a C-46 that flew into Evansville once with the Commemorative Air Force. And I saw it, and I called my dad and said, I'm gonna pick up my sons and take you out there. When we got in the plane and he was looking around, they went into the cockpit and there was a little bench seat behind the co-pilot. And my boy says, is this where you sat, Papa? He says, nope, I didn't sit. I stood behind the pilot seat and held on as tight as I could to keep my head from hitting the ceiling in the turbulence.
Wow. That's how it was there. Think of every 3 to 10 minutes and the bumpiest ride. Now, in the United States, we get bumps of 20, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. But you get up to 100 miles an hour. Your dad would say it as it was.
Oh, yeah.
He'd already bumped it his head a few times.
Right.
He wasn't going to bump it another time.
Yeah, there was one in January of '45, they lost 16 aircraft in one night due to a storm.
And they didn't have all good weather reports at that time. You couldn't see, you didn't know, they just sent them up, and it was a tougher time then. Now I'm just gonna focus a little bit on the radios here. Now there's what the radios look like. This is a radio to the right, used in World War II, and the one to the left is a bomb sight. And remember, bomb sights, Irv didn't do that, and Larry's dad didn't do that, but that is a bomb sight was given to us by Mr. Zeiler from the airport here. But there's a Norton bomb sight, and this is not the Norton bomb sight, but it helped the bombers decide where to drop the bombs so they would hit the right places. So we're going to leave the hump right now, and we're going to talk to Mr. Fred Williams here. Any other statements on any?
When we got to India and went to camp, the Japanese were about 20 miles away. And fortunately, we weren't bothered by that.
They're
pretty close then, weren't they? 20 miles, you're in India, you're not talking about, yes.
Yeah. I remember my dad saying his base got strafed once or twice by Jap Zeros came in over the base strafed him. And he thought they were going to have to leave the base when they pushed up, as far as north as they got in Burma at one time.
Now, some statistics say 80% of the Japanese active soldiers were in China. So they were really, it was a very important process for them to gain China. They had to gain the natural resources. They'd already got all the ports, and they got the Burmese Trail. China, in this last river they were going to take over, if we wouldn't defend them, it would have been a problem. Anything else, Irv, you can think of?
No, that's about all
what do you think about our freedom? How do you like our freedom? The young kids today, can you tell them what's the best about our country? And then Larry, you say second. Okay, Herb.
Well, the freedom of our country, you can go where you want to go. You weren't restricted. And also, there was plenty of food, gas. You didn't have to worry about that. It was quite a deal compared to where we were.
Okay. How about Larry? You got any questions about freedom or any thoughts about freedom and how nice a country we got?
We are so blessed to grow up in this country. You think about other people around the world, how they have to live. All we do is walk into the kitchen, turn on the water. We got clean water. We got air conditioning, refrigerator. We got a car parked in the garage. We're so much better off than almost everybody else in the world. And we can put a lot of that credit onto our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and fathers who helped preserve our nation and our freedoms.
Very important.
Freedom to worship the way we want to worship, all that.
5% of the population less live in the United States, and especially women. That'd be 2.5% of the population of women, and they're lucky to be here. It's very, very fortunate to have the freedoms that both of you talked about. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and clean water, and electricity, and utilities. Okay, we're going to change from the Hump to a Korean War veteran. This is Fred Williams. Thank you very much, Irv and Larry. Now, Fred, tell us when you're born and then how long you've been in Evansville. And I know you're a real plane nut. Fred has given this museum tons of planes, tons of his historical treasures. And we're lucky to have him as a supporter of this Evansville Wartime Museum. Fred is an amazing individual. We have many of his models hanging in our simulator room. And we have not hung everything, but Fred's a real airplane nut. But tell us about Korea.
I'm just a nut that likes airplanes. Korea, compared to these two guys, I lived a tropical paradise life in the military. But most of my time was in a communication station right above Pearl Harbor. And I was there for a little over 2 years, and then I spent a year out with the fleet on aircraft carriers outside of Japan. And we operated in that area around Taiwan, Japan, and back we based in Japan, Yokosuka, Japan. And it was one of the few places over there, especially at that time, which was seven years after the World War II, it was one of the few places we could pull into the dock with an aircraft carrier that size. Every place else we had to anchor out and then take Liberty boats in. But I was in a communication intelligence outfit. Just same thing, and just arrested this guy for yesterday or day before. That everything was top secret, and you know, you did what you're told, and you kept your mouth shut. And to this day, I'm not supposed to say anything about some of that stuff. I don't know that it was all that important, but it was to them, and it was to me at the time. And my two older brothers were in World War II. My oldest brother was he was a mechanic, aircraft mechanic, and then became either a line attendant or a crew chief. And he worked on captured Japanese aircraft at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. And then he got shipped over to Indonesia, which at that time was Dutch East Indies. The Dutch owned it. And he was there on a small island for the rest of the war. And right after the war, he told me they had a few snipers up in the hills that would come out and take shots at him when they felt like they could get by with it. And then he went into the occupation forces in Japan. Where exactly in Japan, I'm not sure, but after that, he of course, got discharged, and he came home, and meantime, he got married in 1943, which was a little bit unusual at that time. Right down here on North Main Street, right across Fulton. And my other brother, he didn't get in until near the end when he got out of high school, and he became a military policeman. And my father and grandfather, neither one were in the First World War. I do have a couple pieces of memorabilia from them that I haven't decided what to do with yet. But
That's interesting. You talk about Yokosuka, Japan. I was stationed in Japan in the 70s, but Japan, that was one of the biggest ports for people. So it was a good port
yes.
in mainland Japan. We signed Big Mo in Tokyo Bay,
Right.
but Yokosuka was a big naval base. I don't know if the Navy still has it or not, but Occupation Japan, we still controlled them. I think we changed Okinawa over in 1979 when I was there.
Yes.
So all the street signs changed from the left side to the right side or vice versa. And it really gave Japan back to the Japanese people. That's close to 30 years afterward.
Well, in the Korean War, Yokosuka, Japan Naval Base still had quite a bit of damage from the Second World War, where it had been bombed, and it was nice,
Yeah.
but it was still under reconstruction at that time, and it was not a problem place at all, but just different.
Yes.
You know, it didn't look the same as it did during the war, but there were still many evidences of damage here and there.
Now, thank you very much, Fred. And we did not use many nuclear weapons back in the Korean War or even the Vietnam War, but Larry is a nuclear guy. Can you tell us just about the things we don't want a nuclear war ever, and that was our trump card in World War II with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But can you tell us a little bit your experiences in the 60s and 70s? What you can say, maybe you can't say anything.
I was a nuclear weapons electronics maintenance and calibration specialist in the Army. The Army had tactical nukes, still do. At that time, we had things like the Pershing, which was on a large crawlers that in Europe. NATO used a lot of NATO weapons. They had the Sergeant. Prior to that, they had the Corporal that was being phased out. I was in a unit that trained in case President Nixon decided to put nuclear weapons in Vietnam. We trained on every nuclear system the Army had while I was in that unit. Was in that unit for maybe 6-8 months, and I spent the rest of my training after my time in service after that supporting Nike Hercules anti-aircraft, anti-missile missiles that had nuclear warheads that were around Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis, St. Paul.
So being trained with nuclear, how important is it that we never have a nuclear war?
We never would have one. It's terrible to think about what would happen if nuclear weapons were used anywhere. Even tactical nukes in Ukraine or something is going to be a big deal. So
I think the big thing is on nuclear war, if it ever gets started, how do you stop it? You probably don't.
And probably the end of all of us if we let a nuclear war start. And at least we've had the wisdom not to make any nuclear war after 1945. When we've had all the ability to, probably 10 countries have the ability to now, but if we get the wrong person with the wrong weapon,
Sure.
we could all be in trouble. If it accelerates like Fred says, we got a big problem. And Larry had first-hand experience, and Irv, you lived during that time when the atom bomb occurred, and it was our trump card. But if Hitler or Hirohito would have had the trump card, our lives would probably be different now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much for today's interview. I think this will go down. We'll give you a copy and get it on YouTube and give each one of you a copy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
thank you.